and girls and boys and everybody else that's watching. Hello! Well, Fizzy and I have got another story for you. And Fizzy, seeing as how you've got a starring role in this, would you like to go off and get ready?
Oh yes, I
will! Oh, she's gone. Oh, she's away to get ready to star in our next story. Well, this story starts as all good stories start. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. Now this king and queen, they were as warm and caring about all the people that lived in their land as any rulers could hope to be. They had a beautiful kingdom with mountains and farms all the way down to sandy shores where the fisher folk fished out at sea. They had soldiers aplenty to guard their land, but the king made sure that there was never any war with other countries. He had a beautiful castle where he lived with his queen, and you could say that they had everything to make them happy. Except for one thing. The king and the queen had never had any babies, and they had no daughters and no sons who could rule the kingdom when they were gone. And this was a big problem for the king and queen, and they thought very hard about who they could ask to rule the kingdom after them.
Hello, this is Fuzzy the Fairy, and welcome to the Fairy News Network. Today's top news story: who will be the next leader of our kingdom? Here's a report from Fizzy, who has been interviewing the main runners.
Hello! Fizzy the Fairy here for the Fairy News Network. I am here at the beautiful palace of one of the front runners for the throne of our kingdom, Princess Elsie. Princess Elsie, you have been a princess in your own country for a very, very long time, yet have never taken over the throne from your father. Do you think you stand a chance at being our next ruler?
Well, thank you for asking, Fizzy the Fairy. I think I would make a marvellous queen. I mean, I could be so glamorous. I've had years of experience posing for portraits for all the gossip magazines. Just think of all the beautiful clothes and jewels I will get to wear. Oh, I will be the most beautiful queen that ever graced the earth.
Well, here we are with Pirate Pete, swashbuckling pirate and star of a few fantastic tales, I can tell you. Pete, you have sailed the 7 seas and have had many adventures. Tell me, what would make you settle down to be the ruler of our fine country?
Yeah, I be telling you, lass. One thing and one thing only makes me want to be the king: gold. I have heard that the king's dungeons aren't full of prisoners, but lots and lots of lovely gold, and lots more besides. Jewels and gems, glittering and shiny, and I would be rich, richer than me wildest dreams, and it would all be mine. And I would be needing a queen to sit by my side, if you'd be interested.
I put nae chance.
And finally, here I am in the land of our third likely contender, Prince Bjorn of the Eastern Isles. Now, tell me, would anything make you leave your pillaging ways behind to lead our country, Prince Bjorn?
Leave my pillaging ways behind? No! Once a Viking, always a Viking. War is in my blood. As king, you can imagine what a huge army I would have at my hands. I would expand my empire. Invade! 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 Oh, yes.
Well, there we are. Back to you in the studio, Fuzzy!
Thank you, Fizzy! And now, we have a word from our royal correspondent. Tell me, will the king hate to choose one of that lot?
Well, yes. Well, I suppose that is to say no. I mean, of course, the king does not have to choose royalty. I mean, you would see, he would have a huge amount of public support. That is to say, yes, the will of the people. And it would not be unprecedented to choose by, Palmum Kemeriat Thurrot. And consequently, that is to say, I am free, I am available, and I am ready to commit. Yes.
Did you understand any of that? That's all from us at the Fairy News Network for now.
Well now, the king and the queen thought hard about the people that wanted to rule their kingdom. But they thought to themselves, we want someone who cares for our kingdom and cares for the people, not somebody who wants money or fame or power or war. They thought long and hard about it, and one night, right in the middle of the night, when everybody else was asleep, the king sat up in bed and said, I've got it! We will have a competition! Oh, a competition, said the queen, yawning with bleary eyes. That sounds like a good idea. And, my love, who will be allowed to enter the competition? Why, said the king, anyone. It doesn't need to be someone who has been royally born. It could be the normal people on the street. It could be farmers, teachers, nurses, fisher folk. It could be anyone, even the children of the kingdom. And so it was that the king and the queen sent out men on horseback to visit all of the local towns, all of the local villages, but they went even further. They went throughout the kingdom, and when they got there, they nailed a notice to the tree, took out a trumpet, and they said, "Hear ye, hear ye! A new ruler will soon be needed for our country. If you think you have what it takes, you head to the king's palace 1 month from now." And it wasn't just all the villages and towns in the middle of the country. Off went all the fishwives. They went off in their rowing boats all the way around the coast to make sure that that message got out to every single person in the land. And when a month had passed and everyone came to gather outside the king's palace, well, you should have seen the crowds. There were thousands of people there, and everybody, whether they wanted to take part in the competition or not, they were eager to hear what the king had to say. Well, there was a big cheer, and there was a fanfare of trumpets as the king stepped out onto the balcony with his wife, the queen, standing beside him. And he announced to everyone, "I am here today to announce a competition. Those of you who think that you are worthy of ruling our fair kingdom are to come to me. Your names will be written down, and in return you will be handed from this great big sack one seed. And you will go home, you will plant the seed, and you will return 1 year from now to show myself, the king, and my wife, the queen, what you have grown. You must return. You must, and now." Line up, said the king, and immediately a queue formed, and people queued up to get their seeds from the king. And there were all sorts of kinds of seeds. Tiny little boring brown ones, long thin green ones, tiny ones so small you could hardly have seen it with your eye, and other ones which were the size of a football. The king handed them out one by one and took everybody's name.
Well, here I am in the town where the king has just announced that he is going to have a plant growing competition to decide who will rule after him. Oh, you, sir, I see you have a seed. What would you grow in your wildest imagination?
Oh, in my wildest imagination, you say? Oh, well, I think I would grow some lovely blooms. We're big fans of daffodils in my family, and others might call me boring, but I would like to grow the biggest flower the king has ever set his eyes upon, stretching to the sky in all its yellow glory. Then surely I would win the competition and become king.
Thank you very much, sir. Ah, hello, madam. I see you have a seat there too. What would you grow?
Oh, hello there. Well, I hope my seed will grow into something magic and truly fantastical. Perhaps the fruit of my tree will be shaped like stars and will glitter with every colour of the rainbow. Each bite from the fruit will have a different taste, a delicious taste, and people will come from miles around to taste it. I would surely become queen then.
Wow, that sounded wonderful. Oh, hello, sir. Tell me, do you have a seed?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. So, can you tell me what you would grow in your wildest dreams?
Well, I'm going to plant my seed as soon as I get home. If I had my way, it would grow into the biggest tree house with a different bedroom for each day of the week, a ballroom, 3 indoor bathrooms, and a nice sun lounge where I can relax in the afternoons.
Oh, that sounds magnificent. Will you be growing it in the deep dark wood?
Deep dark wood? No, definitely not. I don't go there much these days. Too many woodcutters and little girls in red hoods. I don't hold with that kind of thing, or pigs for that matter, or boys called Peter. My treehouse will be a safe place to hide. Unless I become king, that is.
Fascinating. This has been Fizzy the Fairy asking, what would you grow?
So, the king had handed out 999 seeds, and everybody had great ideas of what could possibly grow from their seed. Would it be the tallest tree in the world? Would it be a flower of all the colours of the rainbow? What would you grow? I would love to know. And when he had handed out 999 seeds, the king stood and he clapped his hands together and said, well, that's 999 of you. Is that everyone? And just then he heard a little voice, and that little voice said,
Down here, Your Majesty. Down here.
and the king looked down, and just below his balcony was a small boy, about 7 or 8 years old. And the king smiled at him, and he said, yes, young man. And the boy said,
Your Majesty, I would like to enter the competition.
And at this, everyone started to laugh. And the king put his hands on his hips and he said, excuse me, when I announced this competition, I said that everyone could enter. That doesn't matter if you are royal, it doesn't matter if you are a beggar upon the street. Everyone may enter, and that includes you, young man. And the boy stepped up on some steps to the king, and he was handed his seed. Good luck, said the king. And the boy ran home.
When the boy got home, he was so excited that he immediately went to plant his seed. First of all, he found a pot. Then he half filled it with soil and put the seed in the pot. Then he filled up the pot with more soil. He even mixed in some manure from the neighbour's cow. When the pot was full and the seed had been planted, the boy watered the soil so that the seed would grow.
Well, now that his seed was in his pot, that boy looked after that seed so well. Every morning, the first thing that he did was he checked to make sure that the soil was wet enough. If it was too dry, he watered it, and then he put it out into the sun so that the sun's rays could shine upon the seed and hopefully make it grow. And can you guess what was growing in the pot after the first night? Well, can you? Let me tell you, nothing had grown, because it takes more than one night for a seed to grow, even in a fairy tale. And the next night, when the boy had put the seed out all day in its pot, under the rays of the sun, he took it in. He took it in and he kept it next to his bed to protect the seed from the frost and from any animals that might dig up the seed for food, or insects who would nibble away at any shoots. And the next day, well, nothing had grown there either. And after a week, still nothing. Still no little green shoot, let alone a flower or the start of a bush or a tree. But the little boy kept it up. If the soil was dry, he would water it. He would put it out into the warmth of the sun during the day, and at night he would take it in to be protected from the frost and anything which might eat what would grow in the pot. But still nothing grew. And after a month, there was still nothing in the pot. Well, that was okay, because he looked around all his neighbours who had entered the competition, and nothing was in their pots either. And he didn't give up. He kept on going. He was determined. But after 2 months, still nothing had grown in his pots. And as he started to look at what everybody else had grown, he started to see green shoots growing up through the earth. And he started to see the most unusual plants growing there.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Prominent pirate produces perfectly purple pineapple plant. Pal is positively perplexed. Extra, extra! Read all about it!
I come from the land of the snow and ice. To be king of the land would be very, very nice. My tree will be the mightiest that's ever been grown. It shot right up as the seed was sown. My victories will make you sing, with Bjorn the Viking as your king. Hear us cheer and hear us roar. We will fight and we'll go to war.
Well, 6 months had passed and gone, and although everybody else was growing amazing, fantastic plants, bushes, trees, flowers, fruits, vegetables, the little boy would come back to his pot every morning, and although he'd watered it, put it in the sun, take it in at night, still nothing grew. 8 months passed, 10 months passed, and it was the night before he had to go and show what he had grown to the king, when his family came to see how he was. "Well," said his mum, "how's my little boy?" "Oh," he said, "I have tried my hardest and nothing has grown at all, and I'm scared of what the king is going to say to me." "Now listen to me," she said. "You took care of that seed as best as anyone can. You tried your hardest, and that is the most that anyone can do." But I'm scared," he said. "Well, that's okay. It's all right to be scared. Just you be brave. You go and tell that king that you tried your hardest." And so the next morning, the family headed off with the little boy at the front to take his empty pot to the king. And as they walked there, they were overtaken by people with all sorts of strange plants. There was a man with an armful full of the most beautiful flowers that he'd said that he'd grown. There was a lady with a wheelbarrow that contained a very tall, thin tree with spaghetti growing off it. And then there was a man with a horse and cart, and on the back was the biggest turnip anybody had ever seen. And when they got there, it was quite late, and the king had already started looking at 999 plants. There was all sorts. Oh yes, there was the giant cabbage brought by Princess Elsie. There was the purple pineapple plant brought by the pirate. And there was the huge, great big tree brought by the Viking prince. But there were lots of other curious things besides. I can tell you what I brought. My tree was a silver birch, but not any ordinary silver birch, because it had grown flowers which were so small and delicate that they were like little silver bells. And whenever the breeze blew, you could hear music from those little silver bells. I was number 999, but the king didn't seem to be too impressed with my tree. Fair enough, he'd seen all sorts of things. But then the king stood up and he said, "Right, we have seen 999, but I took 1,000 names. Where is the last?" And it was just then a little old lady that was standing next to the boy said,
Here, your majesty, there's a little boy here. He's holding a pot.
Right, said the king, come forth. And people started to part and make a way so that the boy could walk through the crowd all the way up to the king. He was so scared. He didn't want to have failed, so he hunched himself over his pot so that nobody could see. And as he walked, people tried to see what he had grown. It seemed to be the longest walk of his whole life. And at one point he looked up to see how far he still had to go, and a man caught a glimpse of the empty pot with only the soil inside, and the man went, "Oh, I say, look at that. Poor sweet little boy has grown nothing." And when the people around him didn't laugh, he said, "I said he has grown nothing." People aren't naturally cruel, but that man had some of them start to laugh, and there was a ripple of laughter passed across the crowd, and the king put up his hand and said, "Stop, no, bring the child to me." And the boy was taken up some steps by some soldiers onto the balcony where he was stood in between the king and the queen. And the king said, "Well, boy, what have you grown?" The boy raised his head and showed the pot to the king, and he said, I grew nothing, your majesty." And the king said, "I beg your pardon. Say it again, boy, so that the crowd can hear you." And the boy was so scared, and he raised his head and he said, I grew nothing." And he looked at the king, and the king said, "Tell them again, boy, louder." And the boy said, "I grew nothing." And he pulled himself up to the tallest that he could possibly be, and he announced to the crowd that was listening, "I took that seed and I put it in my pot, and I covered it with earth, and I even chased around the neighbour's cow until I had some manure to mix in." And some people laughed again at this. "And I watered that seed every single day if it needed it, and I took it in at night to protect it from the frost and from anything that could eat it, and still nothing grew. Week after week, month after month, and I don't care if I failed because I tried my hardest, and I think I'm quite brave to stand and say that in front of all of you." And there was a ripple across the crowd. Some were laughing, some were shocked that he had spoken like that, and the king put up his hand, and he looked at the boy, and he smiled. "Well done," said the king. "Well done. You see, ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at our next king." And the crowd were shocked, but nobody's was as shocked as the boy, who looked up at the king in amazement. And the king said, "You see, all of those seeds had been boiled in hot water for 3 nights and 3 days. None of them would grow anything. But sadly, all of you who brought a fantastic plant today, you were either so scared at failing, or so determined to be the ruler because you wanted money or fame or power. But this boy here, he looked after that seed like I would have our next ruler look after my kingdom and the people within it. He was brave to come here today to show that he had failed to the king and to all of you. He was brave. Most of all, he did not give up, and he was truthful. So, said the king, you, young man, are to be the next king. And so it was. And you know what? That little boy was the best king that the country ever knew. And everybody in the kingdom lived happily ever after.
So, me and my whole family got to move to the palace. I'm learning to be king. And is there a moral to my story? Well, I suppose there is. Be brave, be strong, and don't give up. Be brave, be strong, and don't give up. Be brave, be strong, and don't give up. Be brave, be strong, and don't give up.
Well then, I hope everybody enjoyed that story.
Oh, I loved it.
Me too. Be brave
Be strong.
and don't give up.
Be brave.
Be strong.
And don't give up.
It was a lovely message, wasn't it? Well, I hope you'll all join us another time. Goodbye!
Goodbye.
Ta-ta.